From TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jarod Duggins, and this is the Careers in Cannabis podcast. On this show, we speak with staffing agencies, cannabis companies, and seasoned traditional market executives in order to obtain a better grasp of the current employment climate and what we might be able to expect of our burgeoning cannabis industry. On today's show, we are joined by James Yagielo of HempStaff, who during our conversation brings light to a few new topics that we hadn't yet discussed on Careers in Cannabis. Topics like just how long it can take to find a job in cannabis, to how having felonies may or may not help your chances of securing that job, and how the cannabis industry might just be larger than you think. A brief note, we recorded this episode of Careers in Cannabis prior to last week's announcement that the unemployment rate had dropped to under the estimated 40 million. Please excuse the misquote. Without further delay, James Yagielo of HempStaff. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
How are you doing over there? I know from prior to the conversation that you're over in Florida. Where are you and how's it going?
Yeah, we haven't been too bad down here. Our headquarters is actually in Key Largo, Florida, about an hour south of Miami. But it's a little more rural since we are far enough away from Miami. So luckily, we have had very few COVID cases. And the new issue with the protests and stuff has gone very peacefully where I am as well. Thank goodness.
Fantastic. Good to hear. With the new totals, and as per May 28th, the New York Post announced that there were it had just topped 40 million jobless claims. It looks like we're going to be having this conversation for a while. And, I wanted to see how, as we emerge from this moment of COVID into, let's call it, well, questioningly, the new normal. What are you seeing as far as new opportunities with the cannabis industry as it starts to wake up, this industry, and the economy starts to wake up?
Well, cannabis is in a very unique situation. It almost overnight went from illegal and skeptical to essential. So it gave legitimacy to the cannabis business as an essential business because the only place that shut down in all the U.S. was Massachusetts adult use dispensaries. Every other adult use or medical program stayed open. So it really legitimized the industry. Everyone kind of had to rework the way they were doing it too. All dispensaries pretty much went to curbside pickup or delivery only, which allowed them to keep all their employees employed. They just, instead of sitting in the shop and, bud tending, if you will, they went out to the curb and did it, or they went on delivery and did it. So we saw not nearly as much unemployment in our industry as other industries had.
Nice. Well, that's a great observation. And, along the way, I like to talk to the people that I'm interviewing and get a little bit of your personal journey into cannabis and specifically, I guess, where you started in staffing and how that curtailed into a career or a staffing company in cannabis. You want to share with our listeners how that happened?
Sure. I graduated. I was up in Ohio, graduated from college in the mid-'90s. In the late 90s, I was looking for an IT job. I graduated with a computer science degree. And while I was looking, they said, hey, we need recruiters, because I went to a recruiter looking for a job. How would you like to do that? I said, well, I need a job. I'll give it a try. And ended up really liking it and being successful at it. And then the .com craze happened. So it was a field day for recruiters. Everyone needed employees in the .com industry in 99, 2000. So it just went from there. I ended up moving to Florida in 2000, got another job with an IT recruitment industry company, and just kept, in different IT recruitment firms until 2014, when I saw cannabis becoming exactly like the .com industry was in 1999. So I formed HempStaff with my wife in 2014, and we've been going at it for 6 straight years and staffed thousands into cannabis, both medical and adult use, and also the hemp industries.
Yeah, staffing thousands of people within this, I do believe, is relevant to a conversation not too many people touch on. And ultimately, when we look at cannabis as an employment opportunity, people by and large look at legal or recreational cannabis as that opportunity, where there's the number 1.5 million job opportunities nationally. But if you look at cannabis as a whole, within the hemp industry, within the CBD industry, and ultimately combining these things into the topic of cannabis, now that broadens that range of jobs available, that total number available jobs, to quite a bit larger, I believe. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. With the passing of the Farm Bill in 2018, it made hemp legal in every state. Some states already have a program, some are applying for a program. So there's a big prediction that by 2030, hemp will actually dwarf cannabis sales, because hemp can be used for so many things, as we know, from concrete and fiber to CBD extraction to rope. It's just such a versatile plant that once there's more factories to process hemp, it's going to really explode even more than cannabis is currently.
Well, yeah, and as it sits, with recreational being kind of the pinnacle right now, until medical discoveries and science and research really becomes the forefront of the cannabis discussion, I agree with you. The largest developments come by way of hemp production and figuring out what we can displace in normal commerce. The plastics and the fossil fuels, all that kind of stuff being replaced by hemp is a huge subject, along with all the textiles and everything else that people don't generally associate with the cannabis conversation. So, it's great to have, James, your perspective here on Careers in Cannabis bring up something that we really haven't spoken about before, which is the job opportunity within the whole of cannabis, not just recreational marijuana or traditionally thought of weed or cannabis or recreational opportunity. It's not just stateside or per state. It's a national and really an international opportunity nowadays. So that being said, is really this show is about relating to people what that opportunity is. And I know you've been around for 6 years in this space. Are there any new tools or new opportunities coming from by way of HempStaff, or anything you'd like to share with the listeners as far as what you've got going, looking forward into this industry as it develops?
Yeah, first, I want to point out what we always tell people looking to get into the hemp or cannabis industry is, don't think of, oh, I want to be a cultivator, extractor, or bud tender if you currently have another professional skill. If you're an accountant, there's no reason to start over as a cultivator unless you really want to. There's accounting positions in the cannabis industry. There's inventory, there's supply chain, there's marketing, there's sales. So a lot of people don't think of what they currently do can be applied to the cannabis or hemp industry. They don't have to recreate the wheel. So we like to point that out first. Second, we offer training courses on the cannabis plant itself. What we found is a lot of people want to get in the industry, but they don't know that much about cannabis. They know it's an exploding industry. They maybe are an occasional or even an often user of it, but they don't know all the cannabinoids or terpenes, let alone what a flavonoid is. So we've created various training courses that we offer to help give people the knowledge and also give them a little boost on their resume. Obviously, if you're submitting a resume for an accountant position and someone else has the same experience as you, but you took the initiative to take some cannabis training and you know the background of the science of cannabis, they're going to interview you over the other person that has no training. So with that said, we've created various state-specific dispensary trainings. We've created a basic non-state specific bud tender training. We've created an advanced training, which really deep dives into the cannabis science. And in Massachusetts and Illinois, we actually have their state accredited responsible vendor trainings. You can get all of our list of trainings on dispensarytraining.com. And lastly, also, we have created recently a social equity division. Social equity is becoming a big thing in a lot of these cannabis markets. They've realized, that there's been a lot of disappropriate arrests And they're trying to make up for that by nominating certain areas or zip codes as social equity zip codes. And people that apply for these social equity licenses look for employees from these specific zip codes. So we create a social equity division that specifically goes out and looks for employees in these social equity areas so that we have employees for the companies that do get licensed as a social equity company.
Oh, what a great program. And, I know out here in Los Angeles, there's attempts on getting these things going, and then there's critiques about how things are going, but the programs are there, and having a specific source of information for people looking to get involved is fantastic. So, James, I think that's a great program to have started. I haven't heard of anything like that so far. So good job on that one.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, when it comes down to candidates and people you're seeing is come into the industry, is number one, through this conversation, I've been hearing that there is a great amount of opportunity in cannabis. And within that, we've got a growing company ourselves. On the other side of it is that within the jobless stats of which we spoke about earlier, the 40 million jobless claims out and about, is there's a lot more people looking for work nowadays than there were, let's say, 3 months ago. Do you have any suggestions as far as brushing up the resume? I know you're talking about the education, you're talking about that. Do you have, as far as narrowing the scope? You said when it's bud tenders, when you're talking about the things that are more of a service-oriented aspect of jobbing cannabis, and it doesn't have more of a state-specific requirement, that you have education in place there. As far as the people who are, let's call it management and above, do you have any tips as far as brushing up on the resume or experiential highlights to bring to the forefront of their resume in order to bring them to the forefront of the conversation with so many people applying for jobs right at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, the management positions in a cannabis or hemp company, they come along a lot in the beginning when the startups are happening. So right now we're getting a lot of those in Missouri for the cannabis companies and in the new hemp states. They don't always require previous hemp or cannabis experience. For example, recently we placed a CEO that had a Harvard MBA, worked for a Fortune 1000 company, but had no cannabis or hemp experience. They just wanted someone with that level of experience as a CEO. So it really, what we ask people to do on their resume, a lot of these professionals that have been in management for a long time have really extensive resumes. Narrow that down. Don't have a resume that's more than a couple pages, and really bullet point the key things that you've done at those jobs. And there's really no reason to go back more than 10 or 20 years. Anything over 20 years, really, they aren't going to take into consideration. So, and like you said, the education of cannabis always goes a long way on a resume as well. That's really the tips I have. Unfortunately, it is very competitive right now. While a lot of cannabis companies have told us June is the month they're looking to expand because they expect, the reopenings. They can reopen their stores, but they're still going to have curbside and delivery. And now they have twice as many patients. They're going to need more employees. So we do expect a rush of jobs to come in. However, I can tell you last month, a sales job in Los Angeles, we had 700 resumes for it. So it is very competitive. We also tell people not to give up. If you want to give it in this industry, it'll take 6 to 8 months of applying to different jobs on average. You got to be persistent, look for cannabis education, and apply to jobs that you're actually qualified for. That's the best advice we can give.
Those are fantastic tips. And again, I think we uncovered another train of thought and perspective for our listeners to consider is that when considering cannabis as a career choice or a career in cannabis as a field of employment, is that cannabis isn't only about THC. Cannabis is about hemp. It's about CBD. It's about the plant in general, and so goes the employment opportunity in general. It's not just about your state recreational licenses or your MSOs. It's about your hemp producers, your hemp farms, your textiles, your seeds, your nutraceutical companies that are coming about. It's about the CBD companies, the tinctures, the different levels of marketing companies that will be supporting this infrastructure. So I think, James, you touched on something that our listeners really need to consider is that with so much competition going for the obvious jobs, is thinking outside the box may give you a foot up on the competition and getting there first.
Absolutely. And I also want to mention, a lot of people think, oh, I have a felony on my record, I can't work in the cannabis industry. Well, that's true for most cannabis licensed companies. That's not the case for hemp companies or for ancillary businesses. So someone with a record can still work in the industry, but working for an ancillary business supporting the industry, or by going into the hemp or CBD side.
You bring up an interesting point, and I'm going to go ahead and identify with who you just spoke to there. I am somebody who has carried with me my whole life felonies, and it not only foreshadowed what I thought I could get involved with. It limited the scope of what I thought I could do with cannabis once we got here to legalization, as far as licensing and being on a license and doing that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I am here to tell you that the cannabis industry specifically, just like James said, it's almost now that the right type of cannabis felony or the right type of drug experience prior to this is pretty decent check on the box, on the resume box. It gives you the experience mark that they're looking for there, if it happened to be within cannabis and that type of thing. So, James, as you said, felonies shouldn't necessarily make people shy away from going after the opportunity that they think is best fitting for them.
Absolutely. Like I said, there's many markets that can go into it with the felony. There's many states that will still allow them to work in the cannabis industry with a felony. And now there's a lot of states that are expunging those felonies too. So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can still work in the industry where 5 years ago people didn't think that would be possible.
Great point. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's something that I hadn't shared with our listeners as of yet. But, yeah, it's something that needed to be spoken about, because I'm sure I'm not the only one with that type of background. So, James, along with everything else you shared with us and all the great bits of information, thank you for that. And thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. I just wanted to let all your listeners know where they can find HempStaff. We have a few different websites, hempstaff.com. You can register there if you're looking for employees, register if you're looking for a job, and upload your resume to get our monthly job postings. We also have a job board, cannabisemployment.com, where we post our public job openings. The private ones we send out in the email, as some companies do not allow us to post their jobs. But all public ones are on Cannabis Employment. And as I mentioned earlier, dispensarytraining.com has our training schedule. And we're on all social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, under HempStaff. You can find us there. And you can always email us at info@hempstaff.com as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners. I'm sure after our conversation that you're going to get a few people heading your way.
Right.
So again, James, thank you so much for the conversation, and thanks for coming on. I look forward to staying in touch with you and checking back in to see how things are developing with HempStaff.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
Talk soon. You can follow our series, Careers in Cannabis, as well as more great shows like this one at TRICHOMES.com. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, please reach out. You can reach the show via emailing careersincannabis@trichomes.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join in the discussion with industry insiders by visiting trichomes.com and following us on all social media. For trichomes.com, I'm Jarod Duggins. Be well, and thank you for listening.